Welcome to Aura
All right.
Talks.
Hi everyone, Dambi here. Welcome back to another episode of Aura Talks. We are currently at episode 6, and I'm delighted to have with me today B, our fellow Aura team member, and Julian, who is serving on the boards of AVI and AVI USA. It's also noteworthy to say that Julian formerly served as a member of Auroville's International Advisory Council. So I'm excited to have such an active and integral member of the AVI community to further explore the potentialities of the Aura currency for the community, and also to discuss the long-term goal of manifesting the global vision of the Aura and how perhaps AVI could be of assistance in that process. So thank you so much, Julian, for joining us today on Aura Talks. Could you please give our audience a brief introduction about yourself and elaborate also maybe on what type of role you played as a member of Auroville's International Advisory Council Board?
Yes, I was fortunate out of college, full of ideals about the future and interested in Buckminster Fuller and the World Future Society and looking for manifestations of ideals to meet Robert Lawler, who was a pioneer in Auroville and actually was at Forecomers, the first settled community, and someone who was a polymath himself. He was very deep into his Hatha yoga practice. He was a student of sacred geometry and understood a lot of esoteric teachings, and was an artist. And both innovating in foam sculpture in the early days, back with when Warhol was around in the Village in the 60s, and his partner Deborah was a dancer involved with Judson Memorial Theater. These are kind of, avant-garde New York City glory days of artists and musicians and dancers, creative people who were pushing the boundaries, and that made the transition from the beat generation of poets and visionaries into the cultural counterculture of the 60s, which we celebrate in Woodstock and Berkeley.
Yeah.
And I really found in Bucky Fuller someone who was taking his appreciation of mathematics and someone who's an original thinker and saying, look, we need to solve the world's problems as an engineer would, not as a politician would, not seeking for power, but seeking for the best for humanity that we could manage. And it was so astonishing to find that he had been in India for Sri Aurobindo's centenary in 72 and was close to Dr. Karan Singh, who was chairman of the governing board for many terms. So I found that my burgeoning interest in Sri Aurobindo and Auroville had that similar thing. Here were people who had very high ideals, but they were manifesting them. They were really trying to innovate and experiment, and Lawler especially was experimenting with food and was growing algae in Forecomers and looking to say, how can we simplify our diet? How can we bring vitamin A, which is very much lacking, into the local village diet and to nourish people and to simplify and yet create and explore new boundaries. Yeah. So that was really that adventure of consciousness that drew me, and I felt, these are people who really are trying to experiment practically and getting their hands dirty.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I had no idea. I honestly don't know the early days of Auroville. I'd really like to sit down with B once when I'm in Auroville next, and he can talk about all the pioneering that he did with his fellow Aurovillians.
You have to read his book. He has a great book.
I have actually read his book, but I have to hear it from the horse's mouth. It's different to read it on text versus like hearing it from a person. I wanted to actually start this conversation by addressing the question, what is AVI? If I'm being completely honest, despite the fact that I grew up in Auroville, I didn't really know what AVI was until I left the community, went to Berlin and was attending high school there. And I got to meet Georg, Muna, and Isa, who are active members of AVI Germany. So I remember thinking to myself, okay, as a clueless teenager, I was thinking, why would people who don't even live in Auroville as a community dedicate so much of their time and effort to like helping out this community? Because for me, it makes sense. If you're living in Auroville, of course, you want Auroville to be prosperous and collective. But why would people outside do that? So I wanted to just ask you both, what is AVI? What are some like relevant historical background of AVI? And what are its main ideals?
I just would mention a couple of things. One is John Ah is a Baha'i who was really in the first iteration of Auroville International and was doing fundraising and project management and had an executive ability, and I think was drawn in and encouraged by Mother, who was looking to bring in people who had relevant management and fundraising skills. She was extremely practical.
Yeah.
And it's a great tragedy. Some of you know of Oro culture, who just passed. That was her husband. And because he was a Baha'i and went back to Iran, he disappeared because the Baha'is were being persecuted at the time. So there's really a kind of tragedy in that first incarnation of Auroville International. And then fortunately, B knows and can complement this story. In America, June Mayer was in Frederick Spiegelberg's class with Michael Murphy, hearing about Sri Aurobindo at Stanford. Michael Murphy being the founder of Esalen and someone who also served on the International Advisory Council. And she took up this idea of making an Auroville Association in America that later became the branch of Auroville International.
Wow, interesting. B, what were your initial experiences with AVI? Do you have a close relationship with AVI USA? Like, as an Aurovillian living in the community, how could you explain how the AVI liaisons and centers around the world interact and communicate with the community?
Yes. Well, Julian just gave you the background a bit, but what happened at one point, we had these associations, as he mentioned. June had her association in California, and then in France, there was an association in a few other places. So then Carl Tame, a Dutch lawyer, he was able to establish this Auroville International as a legal body in Holland, in The Hague. So at that point, I was happening to go to USA. This is 1983 we're talking about. So in 1983, what happened was we tried to get everybody on board to join this new Auroville International group. And in US, there was some resistance. People wanted to keep their old Auroville Association. June Mayer was very much for it. But they had a board, and we had the usual debates and issues. But eventually, we worked out all the details, and then we had this incredible organization that has served us since then, and has stood by Auroville during the crisis. You see, when we had the crisis in the 70s, when it looked very doubtful that Auroville could even survive, AVI stood up and went to the government, and the government listened to them because this was an international. So Julian was part of a lot of that work, so he knows those details. But it's a great story. AVI has been such a support for Auroville.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that I got to get in touch with AVI, and I hear that AVI Germany is quite up there. They're like quite active, so it's really nice to meet them. And really, it was the first time in my life that I understood that tapping into or manifesting the vision doesn't necessarily require the physical presence in the community. It's more so like aligning yourself with the vision, and wherever you may be in the world, you could like contribute and dedicate your efforts for that. Because of course, as a teenager, you just think of action being proactive in the physical context, right? You like, I have to be there. I have to go plant trees. I have to go learn how to farm or do whatnot in Auroville. But it was the first time like talking to a lot of AVI Germany members that I learned, okay, wow, you can do a lot from abroad. And that's why also I felt so encouraged to take part in the Aura project, despite the fact that I'm not living there right now. I feel like I can do a lot from outside of Auroville too. So I wanted to talk right now about the current economic climate in Auroville, right? So maybe identify some rooms for improvement. So as we all know on this chat, the outbreak of COVID-19 has led to the biggest global stillstand in modern history. And it's, I think what we're currently seeing is the crumbling of very well established economic systems. And it would be also false to say that Auroville is immune to that, like jolt, so to speak, right? Auroville, we sometimes think of as a separate bubble from the rest of the world. That's not like that's immune to these type of things. But this time, I think Auroville is going to be affected or economically affected because from what I can tell, Auroville's income does largely depend on the influx of tourists. And right now, in this year and the coming years, that may be impacted. So what I've noticed is that there is a certain insecurity in the community of how it's going to financially sustain itself in the coming years. And I wanted to take a short moment to read an excerpt that the FAMC, so the Funds Assets Management Committee in Auroville, released on 2nd of April. They said, it's a short excerpt, the COVID-19 crisis will have a big impact on Auroville's financial situation, and not only on units' contributions. We also expect additional costs for healthcare and other emergencies. Currently, city service has a buffer to last around 2.6 months if we keep our budgeted expenditure as it is today. Emergency resources need to be deployed to protect all affected Aurovillians and communities. So this brings me to my next question. So Julian, B, to what extent is Auroville reliant on external funding to finance its day-to-day activities?
I try to follow the details, and I don't know how many people actually read each unit and what they're contributing every month, but I do follow this. Partly because I was given the initiative to open a shop, boutique in Woodstock and import from Auroville. So I got to see and meet over the years Paul and Laura, who did Maroma, and understand their very important contribution, and Bobby at Oramics, and could also see with the passing of Prema Intano that Oromode is now a guest house. And that had been a significant, like Philor, a significant clothing manufacturer and exporter, and people who were working with international aid organizations and getting products from Auroville out into the world. And I love the fact that something like silk, which is light, it could be painted beautifully with the Tamil workers who would work with Andre's designs and create a beautiful scarf. So it's a value-added product taking advantage of the handicraft tradition, and really felt like Auroville should have those things, as well as computer, which was very important early, computer networking, the work that Uli and so many others were doing, uninterrupted power supply. So many things were done out of necessity, the ferrocement work that's being done at CSR. So all these different threads, and I always felt like the important thing is diversity. And I was really concerned when Maroma seemed to be kind of lopsided, and then all of a sudden a pizza place is bringing in money. You know, this is like perfect kind of cosmic joke that pizza would be. But of course, it's the efficiency of the person who's managing it. And then I used to bring chocolate to India, and now Mason and Company was making extraordinary organic chocolate. So I really am so proud of Auroville in creating these small industries and diversifying, and feel that that's terribly important for the health of any community. So, but the need for people to have that extra income and to rent out houses or rooms in their houses is creating a housing crisis. And it's the same Airbnb is affecting us in America. And this is the thing. It's a microcosm. Things that happen in Auroville are reflecting the larger trends. There are people, low-income people, who can't find rental housing in my community because of Airbnb, because they get more income from people driving up from the city and renting than they would from a local person renting. And so these economic inequities and the need to not rely on one thing, because as we've seen with the virus, all the restaurants and all of the tourist related hotels, motels, service industries are suffering terribly.
Yeah, exactly. So
you need resilience.
Yes. I mean, thank you for sharing your views, Julian. What are your thoughts, B, personally on this topic? So for me, it's interesting. Whenever I envision an ideal society, especially in terms of how its economy should be structured, I believe that it should be, it should self-generate enough income to provide for the needs of like community members, right? So I wanted to ask you, as Auroville being a city in the making, it's always going to be a work in progress. How far do you think we have advanced in that regard?
Well, obviously, we never advanced far enough, fast enough, and especially in my impatient view. But what I noticed in the COVID brought some very unexpected and very, I think, welcome changes. One of the things that has really impressed me is that everybody now is into this permaculture gardens. We call them circle gardens, and people like Krishna Solitude is on TV, is on YouTube, and they just did 17 gardens in Auroville around.
Yeah.
So people start to connect to local food. They start to connect to the real aim. One of the real aims of Auroville, of course, is to be a sustainable community.
Yeah.
But people were always divorced from that. And now this brought it home to them. And so they respond. And then we also see the science part of it. We come up now with trees and plants and things that grow really well here, grow easily. So the recipes and the groups that meet to eat the wild landscape is sort of exponentially increased just in the last couple of months. So that to me was a tremendous thing. And then also I didn't feel in the community any negativity about the COVID in terms of people feeling insecure or,
really?
That now we have no money or something like that. I didn't sense that. I didn't meet people who were panicked or people who thought, oh, now it's going down. I didn't experience that personally. Now, of course, in a place like Auroville, there must have been some people who freaked out. I don't know, but I didn't meet them. And I noticed also that the response to the community to organize the food situation was spontaneous, and volunteers came forward. And so places like the Portus, they functioned really well, with the masks, and everybody did all the protocols, and everybody flowed. They went to the old people, brought the food. Nobody suffered, let's say. And at home, I didn't feel any constraints at all. And also the ice cream place here, the local ice cream, that has now moved into Portu. So now we have an ice cream freezer. So and even the Koreans now are utilizing the Morgan Cafe at night. So we just went tonight, had some Korean food. So there's these expanded things are happening. Other restaurants are opening. Even though we're in this condition. So I would, yes.
Wow, so that's really interesting to hear that the COVID-19, for me, I thought people were in a state of panic in Auroville, but instead from what I'm hearing, people are starting to be more entrepreneurial even to understand not only entrepreneurial in terms of the commercial way, but also really getting back to the roots of like growing your own vegetables and being much more, how do you say, environmentally a sustainable community in terms of also focusing a bit more on the agriculture sector. So I'm really, really happy to hear that.
And one other thing I noticed, because I've been working at eco-service where we collect the trash and all that, people become much more conscious about recycling, about sorting their waste, and utilizing resources from that immense possibility that we have. So people have woken up to that. And so various communities have cleaned up their, their transfer areas. So I see very positive things happening.
Wow, that's really nice to hear, B. I really would like to know, getting back to what you say, Julian, about just the impact of, let's say, something like Airbnb, right? I just wonder, oftentimes I really like talking a lot about economy, inquiring a lot about Auroville's economy last year. People made this one remark oftentimes. They said, Auroville relies too much on tourists, right? So what are your thoughts on that? The fact that, like, yes, you have mentioned several like really successful units that have really been innovative and that have managed to come up with really amazing products. But do you think that there is a tendency in the community to rely too much on tourists?
I always, it's almost like a mantra for me. Everything is there if we take the trouble to look for it. We had a member of Auroville, Joan Tome, who was involved with Biosphere, which was an eco experiment to see if people could live a certain amount of time in almost like a terrarium, a closed environment. And there were a lot of difficulties, partly because they didn't realize the interaction of concrete with the atmosphere over time. So there were some technical problems that they ran into. But the basic premise of crowd control and channeling people, which have been dealt with by Disney World and Biosphere and any, the Louvre, the National Gallery of Art. What Auroville was not, I think, understanding is it should be a place where people from all over the world can come, and especially within India, and find out what's going on. But until we had the visitor center and the doing of the Matrimondier, I thought of it a suggestion and or go out into the community and show up in someone's garden as a tourist and kind of impinge on their lives. So for me, it's not that Auroville relies too much on tourism, but how do you have controls and protection for the Aurovillians not being inundated, and also not have the roads or the dust or the lorries, the trucks, for those of you who aren't Indian vocabulary oriented, trucks that would take shortcuts through Auroville on these dirt roads and put a lot of dust in the air and be driving by the sports ground where the kids are playing. There are a lot of legitimate concerns about intrusions into Auroville, and in terms of pedestrian traffic and the bike paths and sanctuaries within the community. And you don't want to be a gated community. You don't want to isolate yourself from the world, but you do want to protect the sanctity and what everyone likes to call the atmosphere of the community, and still have exchange and still allow people to come in. So it's always this lovely dance of how do you find the right ecology of people visiting Auroville. And I feel Auroville actually errs on the side of so many people coming with goodwill. So many people needing desperately something that is not this dystopian future that's portrayed in every movie about the future that comes out, that's apocalyptic. The air is terrible, there are gangs, there are violence. This is not what nourishes people's hearts and souls, and it's certainly not the vision of an evolving humanity.
Yeah.
And it's very important for Auroville to get this right, because, one act of rudeness or one act of disconnect, when people are really coming on pilgrimage, this is someone's aspiration, sometimes driving hours or coming halfway around the world.
Yeah.
How do we honor that? How do we nurture that? And fortunately, we have some lovely people one of whom, Martin Littlewood, his wife is working at the visitor center. And I know, she has that light that you want to meet visitors with. And that's what I want Auroville to have is the Tibetans use the phrase skillful means. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with tourists and understand their potential Aurovillians?
Yeah, it's honestly such an important point that you're bringing up, Julian. For me, I also question how do we remain as a community open to people to because if you want to inspire different ways of being, different ways of sharing, you need to be open. If you're a gated community that's only exclusive for the residents, how are you going to spark any inspiration around the world? But at the same time, you have to find a good balance of not making an amusement park of Auroville, if that makes sense. That people are just coming to just look at the superficial beauties of Auroville, be it Machi Mandir or these really cool architectural buildings, and say, wow, amazing, but without feeling any sort of deeper connection and understanding the true vision of Auroville. So I think it's really interesting. B, do you have any thoughts on this, having been a resident in Auroville for many decades? How do you think we can strike this balance that Julian was really highlighting before?
Well, just as you said, and as he said, you see, it's a question of that skillful means to take this energy and give the best of Auroville to them. And at Matra Mandir, they've always struggled with that because so many people, want to go and see the golden ball. And we have a pretty good system, and we have a way to people allow them to meditate in the chamber, and we give them a little talk about Auroville, so people can, and we have videos. So the visitor center certainly can expand its facilities. It can open up more. Many things can still be done, but we've done a significant work so far. But as you say, we have to open to the world because Auroville belongs to humanity.
Yeah.
The whole mission of Auroville is the human unity. So if we send another message, like Julian said, so many people have come to Auroville and been rebuffed for one reason or another, and that should not happen. So how do we ensure that somehow anybody who comes to Auroville is at least given a fair shake on being able to view what's really happening here? So more exhibitions. And now they want to open up Bharat Nivas. We're making a path from the visitor center. The people who want more in-depth information can walk over to Bharat Nivas, and there will be people there to explain the international zone, Bharat Nivas, House of India. Then they can walk over to Unity Pavilion, see the displays, and then to Savitri Bhavan, and then to African. The African Pavilion you see is right in a circuit.
Yeah.
So with that little walk, and they're already doing it, some people are already doing it, but we're going to refine that. So that will give a more in-depth experience to people who want that. Yeah. And that will be available. But
that sounds
more
like
of those things, yeah.
That sounds like a really good step.
There are people doing that already. There are private people doing that. Yeah. People who have an association with Auroville, but we need Auroville itself to do it more.
I agree. That's definitely the right step forward. I would love to know, B, do you feel, because Julian also mentioned that people coming into Auroville shouldn't seem like an intrusion, right? Because that takes away from both sides the beautiful atmosphere of Auroville. So do you feel like as a resident, you feel like during the peak of, let's say, tourist season, you feel like there's a lot of intrusion, like you don't feel comfortable going out into the community because it's too hectic and there are too many people asking too many questions. So what is your personal perception of that situation?
Well, that doesn't happen so much to me. I mean, people do come here because I live in the international zone, and some people hear about my Taj Mahal house and they want to see it and everything. But
Yeah.
usually those people, there are not that many, and I can handle that.
Mhm.
But if it's more organized at the visitor center, so people have always specific interests. People want to see the architecture or the art or something like that. So we do need more, and we did open this upcycling studio little shop in visitor center where we had little workshops, and the thing has got a teeter-totter out in front. It's got a place in the back where people can make things out of waste, and so all those little steps are all important, and people come there, they can experience a bit of Oroville. But
Yeah.
of course, we can't have people going into the schools. The schools, you know, the people are having class. People want to see the education, but they would have to, would have to be an organized tour, and
I
they
agree.
do that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
agree. I
actually,
think
if somebody really wants, they can find their way in. But
yeah.
but it's not going to be handed to them. You know, like they walk in the door and they say, "Oh, I want to see this," and it won't happen that way. But if they do their research and they send a few emails or make a few phone calls, almost anything can be organized.
Yeah, I agree, B. I think there should be efforts from both the community as a whole, but also from the individual. So my rule of thumb, whenever I'm back in Auroville, I try to meet every new person with like a really embracing attitude. So because I feel like when that's the way that I think we can really inspire others, right? Even though it might be annoying to have always the same questions asked. As a teenager, I really didn't put enough effort. Every time I met someone new, I was like, go to the visitor center. Here's a brochure. I don't know, go to auroville.org. I mean, they're very passive answers. But now that I'm more of an adult and I feel much more closer to the community, especially through this Aura project, I feel like it is also within my own power to help people feel, whether even for a short period, feel integrated and feel like they're part of this beautiful atmosphere. So yeah.
Well,
The
absolutely.
next,
You're a great ambassador also.
exactly, youth ambassador. Julian, I really wanted to thank you for sending me interesting articles and also some podcast episode. I'll definitely give the one that you sent me today a listen. Thank you for that. I can definitely tell that you're quite well versed in the topic of alternative/local currencies. So what are your personal views on that in terms of implementing something like that in Auroville? Because obviously B has had his attempts and we're going to give Aura a rebirth. So I just wanted to hear from you what your thoughts are on alternative currencies in the context of Auroville.
Yeah, I feel very blessed because through my association with Auroville, I met William Irwin Thompson, who was a cultural historian, an author, someone who brought together extraordinary groups of forward thinkers and innovators for conferences. And he had met Mother, had her darshan in, I think in the late 60s, chronicled this in a book called Passages About Earth, visited Findhorn, visited Arcasanti, visited Zen Center, and had a conference in New York called Spiritual Communities for a Planetary Culture, and was seeing these as the seeds of the new planetary culture. And he would have a conference, and I would get to meet E.F. Schumacher, who wrote Small is Beautiful, and Gregory Bateson, the epistemologist whose daughter Nora is now carrying on his work, and spiritual teachers like Brother David Steindl-Rast, who has an incredible work centered around gratitude, and also someone who was exploring the Catholic contemplative tradition and Zen. And among those people were economists, and the most interesting was Hazel Henderson. And Hazel was married to Carter Henderson, and though she was not an economist by training, by association, she was hanging out with the best and brightest and seeing trends in the economies, and said, we have this interest rate thing, it's like having one control to run the airplane. And this is madness. And I also have in our neighborhood, in Great Barrington, Western Massachusetts, a few hours away, the E.F. Schumacher Society.
Yeah.
So having met Schumacher at Lindisfarne and going to visit them in Great Barrington, where some of the Lindisfarne people branched off after leaving New York. Some went to Crestone, to the Baca, where Cyril lived and created Savitri House. And in Great Barrington was Robert Swan, who was an architect, pacifist, innovator, and really the father of this whole land trust movement. And they were about to issue a currency called the Berkshires. And I was in the meetings when they were first presenting the designs for that currency. There was a delicatessen that was giving currency a year out, saying, you give us $10 now and we'll give you $12 in goods when we open. So they were self-financing. And then Paul Glover and Ithaca Hours was there. So many people were drawing on Robert Swan and Ralph Borsodi's thinking to implement, which they did very successfully in the Ithaca Hours. And of course, I remember going to Auroville and coming to a fair, and they were issuing whoopies as the currency instead of rupees. So the whoopee, I know, was an early Auroville currency. So I think anyone who is concerned with economics, social justice, hierarchies, caste system, imperialism, cultural imperialism, this access, and now America is going through a very deep dive into racism and how redlining, which was not loaning to black neighborhoods, or not even now in making these funds available during the COVID crisis, they're not getting out to people of color and small businesses. I just saw it on the news last night. So the same limited thinking that does not recognize the equality of human beings, of our spiritual divine nature that transcends all the colors and labels and everything. This has to have practical implementation.
For sure.
And certainly what was done with Ithaca Hours, and ironically, in times of crisis. Some of us believe, because Larry Brilliant, who was involved with Seva and Dr. Venkataswamy and the Aravind Eye Hospital, was key in helping to eliminate smallpox in India. He knows the dynamics of what an epidemic can be, and like others, says we're at the beginning of this. And everyone who thinks that by declaring that we're reopening, that somehow we're going to solve the problem, is going to end up the way Arizona is right now, with its emergency rooms full and the crisis building.
Yeah.
And I really think it's practical to explore for Auroville, even though, and I hope, I have no apocalyptic vision. I want everything to be harmonious and progressive, but it's like trust in God and tie your camel. And local currency is a way of keeping the community wealth circulating within the community. You and B and anyone who's looked at this understands this very well. And that it also allows what we have in the Native American tradition of the potlatch, that the most accomplished and successful person is the one who gives away the most. Mm. And when you are printing your own money, you can give some away. And that's very much part of the ideal. Right now, we have Steve Mnuchin and the Goldman Sachs people printing money and giving it to their friends.
Yeah.
And it would be so much better if it was given to the people who really need it.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of elevation of consciousness that we're calling for, to not be greedy, to not be egocentric. These are fundamental to any spiritual path, to know ourselves and to have compassion for others, to have empathy for others, which unfortunately is totally lacking in the leadership in America, and that's why we are in decline.
Yeah. That's why I'm hoping with the Aura project, we're going to create a new form of money, reshape the perception of money in a much more caring and humanistic way, where we really emphasize the value of a human, that each human, for being alive and for breathing and for being a conscious being, deserves help. That there should not be any prerequisites or any factors out of their own control, be it like previous socioeconomic status, race, whatever that may be. Transcend past all of that and just get to the same page. Like, we're all human beings and we need to be there for each other, and each human deserves help, right? So that's what I personally hope the Aura can remind like the Auroville community, and also hopefully, if it's successful in Auroville, the rest of the world. So I think it's like a step-by-step process. I would like to really ask both of you this question of, so the mother really did envision a moneyless society, right? So I wonder, how do you think we can actually move towards that? Because now what we're doing with this project is reshaping money, or like creating new forms of money, which is obviously it's like a step in the right direction. So what do you think? Do you think that that's actually a possibility to have a moneyless society?
Well, I think you can start with Bernard Lettier, the one of the architects of the euro, who said that he could design a currency specific to any particular problem.
Yeah.
That there are ways to give value that helps steer society. And you could say ultimately that if we were so innovative and so, I would say, divinely inspired, I think of so many of the great inventions came from dreams, and from so many musicians or poets, they feel they're channels for something. And so to the extent that Auroville and its spiritual aspiration can also be manifestors of innovation, whether it's the water purification or some innovation that Saprem does with the mud brick, excuse me, that the spirulina unit can give some bar with complete nutritional value. That those innovations, as happen with the local area networking, can give Auroville a financial boost and make funds available to the point where you can say, okay, you have free electricity, you have such a surplus that we don't need to be concerned about circulation of money in the traditional sense, except with the outside world. But Lettier, who actually looked at the ideals of Auroville and said, as far as I'm concerned, these are the best of any community on the planet. Mm-hmm. So here's someone who's, and I love the synchronicity. Mark Lux, who is also on the International Advisory Council, his mom lived next door to Lecce. There are all these lovely things. Robert Swan, who was doing this incredible work in land trusts and alternate thinking in the Schumacher Society, he's the uncle of Bill Leon's wife. Bill being one of the past presidents of Auroville International USA. Yeah. So I really feel like we're all part of an extended family.
Yeah.
And because I'm such a compulsive networker, I'm happy to see these threads that, someone else will just say is tangential, but I feel it's part of the Leela. I love that this is all connected somehow, at least in my mind, if nowhere else.
Same for me.
And that we should have these high ideals and not to get away from consumer culture and, all of these memes and platitudes of live simply so that others can simply live, to have voluntary simplicity, to have what you need and not be dominated by greed. I don't know what other bumper sticker.
Thank you for sharing, Julian. What about you, B? What are your thoughts on whether do you think that it's possible for that one day Auroville can be a moneyless society, but in the way like Julian described, that it's not necessarily that we'll never have any connection or any interaction with money, because Auroville will only be a healthy community if it has a good influx and interaction with the outside communities. So not in the sense that it's an eradication of money altogether, but that to like what Julian was describing, right? That like to the extent that these nitty-gritty, yeah.
Yes, Julian got it. Julian usually gets it right. So what we can say many things about these things. I mean, we've all read all the books and Julian just gave us that link to Thomas Greco, again, who came to Auroville in 2006 and explained it all. So I don't know why it didn't all happen in 2006 in Auroville.
And Margaret Kennedy.
There's so many. Yeah, also.
Margaret Kennedy, you had three of the world's leading experts coming to Auroville and recognizing and offering to Auroville.
Wow, that's really wonderful. Yeah.
Well, no, Don B brought the leading experts in universal basic income here just last year. And we had, we had the cream of the crop from around the world here in Auroville, and they gave talks every night. So it's not that we lack any of the information, and we also have the system to do it. And I was just at a meeting yesterday with our financial minister, who is called Otto. So Otto, we're going for a new step. We're going to take a step in this prosperity system.
Yeah.
So already that's going to be a break from what we have now. So these little steps are what we need to get to this moneyless society, because people somehow are very resistant at this level of their own security. Yeah. So some of us who are a little older realize that we get taken care of no matter what happens, but other people are still not quite so sure about that because of whatever their background.
Yeah.
And if anybody, you see, we have people who come from a deprived background. If you're coming from some kind of deprived background, it's always in your subconscious, I have to look out for number one, or, because nobody else will. So we have to put a little aside, and we have to do this. And, so all of those we have to face head on. Yes. And definitely it's going to happen because it's in process. And if we don't do it ourselves, it comes from, as Mother always said, crushing circumstances. COVID is a crushing circumstance.
Yes.
So especially our way of dealing with each other, because the money thing is only quite far out there in the exterior. We get to the interior attitudes, we get to our aspiration, we reconnect to the ideals of Auroville, then these things flow naturally. It just happens spontaneously. It's not something we have to impose or a new system we have to come up with. No, we have it. We have what we need. It's a question of doing. See, and I get a little anxious sometimes if people don't want to do it. They want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk about it for 50 years. Okay, now's the time.
Speaking of like more action and less talking and actually the more walking, I really do think the Aura platform is a direction, is a right step in the right direction, because we are actually, technically, we have developers who are actually developing this platform, which I think is a huge accomplishment, right? So, Julian, I wanted to ask you, how did you get to hear about the Aura platform? Like, how did you initially hear of it?
Yeah, I think because I'm interested when something comes up in Facebook or there's a post or a reference or something, I like to follow the thread.
Yeah.
And a lot of like Krishna's garden, things, they're like ripples that go out. And I'm on the intranet in Auroville. I look at the Auroville Today. I look at news and notes. I'm living vicariously to some extent, and we always want the torch passed on to the next generation.
Yes.
So because of my earlier interest, to see that you and some of your friends, and to have the technical support, and to have B as the sage of Santa Rosa,
our dear mentor B,
is good and heartening.
Yeah.
Because we like Thomas Greco, having been there. And now you can see that a lot of this was presented, and you can be amazed, as I always am, at the immense opportunities that are offered to Auroville. Time and
I would love to know, Julian, I feel like you are quite a fan of Aura Talk, so you're quite well informed and up to date regarding the progress of the project. So do you have any questions regarding the Aura platform, any suggestions or concerns that you would like to share with the Aura team? Because I think it's really important.
I looked to see what the state of the Ithaca Hours was, because this was, all through the 90s, being promoted as one of the great successes of a local currency in America. And we have other examples internationally in other innovative communities and experiments in international living. But you could see that when Paul left Ithaca, he was like the evangelist.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, we're still at a state of consciousness where people follow a leader, and someone has to go around prodding and evangelizing and saying, look, this is a good thing. Then you have the crushing circumstances where people are looking themselves. So this may be one of those perfect storms of a threat and opportunity coming together to interest people and saying, what do we do if we have hyperinflation, or whatever depression, calamities, economic hit? What is there left? So I think it's very timely, and that sharing of the mission and vision with others, it takes a village.
It takes a village, indeed. And I really agree with the fact what you also mentioned, that the zeitgeist of today is really going to carry this project forward, because I don't think there's ever been a time in modern history where people really collectively question certain things, question how can we create reformations in the economy to best share better with each other, to take care of each other better. And I think especially in a community like Auroville, where we already have such high ideals, I think people, like you said, are much more willing to adopt something like the Aura platform, despite the fact that there is this aversion towards technology in Auroville in general. But I think we're going to overcome that hurdle for once and for all.
Educate me, because is there only an app? There won't be actually currency.
So let me break down the details of the Aura platform. So it will be completely operating on a virtual platform. So it'll be a native mobile app that you can download on an Android device, so a Play Store, or from an Apple device, the App Store. And you, by joining the network, this virtual network, you will get unconditional endowments of 10 auras per day, which will give you an access to offerings from other community members who are also users on this platform. And one thing that you mentioned, which I was completely in accordance with, was the beauty of alternative or complementary currencies in general is that you can give it attributes to encourage certain human behavior. right? So in this case, we specifically, like the Science Walden Center, introduced the depreciation. So the fact that you get these daily endowments, but it depreciates in value at a certain percentage, that the 10 credit that you get today will be gone by the end of the month, right? And what that allows for, or what that encourages, is users to like spend it in real time spending, and also like take away from this idea of accumulating money to get something bigger, better, faster, right?
I'm familiar. Yeah.
Exactly. So what's interesting is, for me, so I had a really interesting conversation with my friend last night, who is like the front end developer for this project. And he said, you know what this Aura platform reminds me of is torrenting. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what torrenting is, but it's a peer-to-peer system wherein you download a file, and while you're downloading a file, you're also uploading a file. And what that allows you to do is basically many people from different parts of the world are just helping each other to share a file and like to download. And so it's a peer-to-peer network, right? And also in a way, Aura platform, and similarly, torrenting would not work without that two-directional exchange. And it's the same with the Aura platform. If you're only downloading, so to speak, there are not going to be opportunities for other people to also download. So you need to also offer, and in the case of technical term, you also have to upload. So I really think that is a key element to the Aura platform, that the success of the platform will be strictly dependent on how many people turn their good intentions into real actions, right? Mm-hmm. Because no matter how many resources or how much money we inject into this platform in terms of giving free stuff away, because that's what a lot of apps do, right? So they release a new app onto the market, and they give a lot of free goods to people to sign up. But I think that's not necessarily going to cut it with the Aura platform. So it's going to be very interesting to see to what extent. Oh, I think that my internet got a bit unstable. Sorry. Did I cut off? Okay.
Just for a minute.
Yeah. So I was just saying that it's the success of the platform is going to strictly depend on how many people turn their good intentions into real action. So no matter how much money we inject into this, and no matter how many leaders we have to promote this app in the community, it comes to the individual to really decide, okay, I believe that I want to be part of a community where other members will take care of my needs, and I can also take care of other people's needs. And the way we facilitate those interactions is through a virtual currency that we have given the name Aura. So that's kind of the gist of the Aura platform. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Julian, because you've obviously read a lot about alternative currencies in general. What do you think would be a huge obstacle for the ubiquitous adoption of Aura in Auroville?
Well, it's always human nature is funny. You know, the carrot and the stick. If there was something that was so desirable that only took auras, you know. So you give the incentive, and then the stick is that everything is collapsing around. Unfortunately, people are so driven by convenience. It's why Amazon is this huge success, because they make it easy and cheap. And it's not driven by values that are concerned with the workers and the fact that the workers are getting sick from the virus. So we really need to, as Venkataswamy saw with the Auroville Eye Hospital, where he wanted to maximize the number of cataract surgeries by adopting from McDonald's and from the production line. You know, how do we take innovations that have succeeded in a capitalist society and repurpose them towards goals that are humanitarian and egalitarian and spiritual?
Yeah.
And try to make this higher synthesis where it's not one against the other, but something that's transcendent and fulfilling to all of the parties. And so it's another bumper sticker, you know, nothing like success. And I think that you know, you can go back to this article that appeared years ago. Why Sri Aurobindo is cool, you know, his philosophy really is cool. It really is.
Yeah.
And what is cool about the aura, and to get that out into the community. And I think there if there can be something between Pondicherry and Auroville, and then the whole world needs what we're working on. So it really is in service to humanity. Whatever successes or experiments or failures and things that we learn from, the important thing is to try. The important thing is not to be inert.
Yeah.
So I wish you every success, and I'm delighted.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian. I really like the point that you made. I think you understand human incentives well. Because you definitely need something that is going to make a user can only get on the Aura platform, right? So that's when I redirect this question to B. What do you think that potentially could be?
Well, I just think the frustrations and the shortcomings that we experience in Auroville. I think the fact of how things are with what happened with COVID, and just our own personal limitations and the situation, because people are ready now finally for that change. When we started the Aura in 2011, they weren't ready. They had the financial system. It was so simple and so easy. You had a number, you could do whatever you want. Now things are more complex. Now we need it, and people recognize that need. And you've done such great work over the last 2 years. We've prepared the groundwork.
Oh my God, yes, we have.
Youth know about it. Yes, as best we could. And it's the right time. You see these things, the zeitgeist and all that stuff is now. So I think it's inevitable it will happen. And whatever happens, it's going to be good. But that's why I keep saying, as Julian said, we have to try.
Yes.
We have to try. We can't keep talking about it. That's the thing.
Yeah. And I think what's really also interesting, again, getting back to my conversation with my friend, who really does come from a technical background. I've learned a lot working with developers and programmers, because they really see the world as an engineer. Also just getting back to what Julian was saying earlier, if you want to solve problems as an engineer, you really look at the world in a specific way, right? And I told them, Andres, if this app is a complete flop, do you think that I'm going to be devastated? Would you be devastated? Because you're also actually technically, you're being the digital architect for this. And he's like, to be honest, I never look at my projects with that attitude, because at the end of the day, all the different code that is used to build this app can be reused for a different, can be repurposed, so to speak. And that's the beautiful thing about, digital architecture. It's so much easier to repurpose than an actual physical architecture. So he said that that's how apps evolve in general, because you have one app that came that didn't do too good, but you take certain elements from that app and then you combine it with other elements from another app, and then comes and voila. So I think, even though, because of course I've invested quite a lot of time into this project along with B, so there is that human tendency to want it to succeed, right? But at the same time, this also project has reminded me that there's also beauty in surrendering, and just seeing beauty in just the doing part without really getting fixated on one outcome. So also that conversation with Andres yesterday really reminded me that. Because if this app doesn't do well, maybe in the next generation, my kids perhaps might come up with an even better app that might change the whole community and the whole world, right? So I'd rather see it in that light. So we have
to take that journey is the destination, Exactly. Already the app has succeeded.
Exactly.
In my view, see, because where is that future? Where is that future? It's already succeeded in the now. It's how much it has done for us as a community already, and how much joy we've had in the process.
I agree.
And now, and Julian, I think, shares that.
I wanted to.
The
last point of discussion that I wanted to bring up was that Auroville, the Aura, it has a global vision. So, Julian, just to explain it a little bit to you. So, what Professor Joe at the Science Walden Center envisioned for FSM, Fees is Standard Money, of which Aura is an offshoot of, he wanted to create different network access points right? So so he managed to establish 5 points for the FSM network in Korea, so in different intentional communities. So a couple around Seoul, a couple around Ulsan, and one also in the island of Jeju. So what he wanted was to create a large global network where users can seamlessly migrate from and to these access points. So let's say me, being a part of the FSM network in Korea, could easily hop onto Auroville and just interact in the same way that I would with the FSM network in Korea, right? So it's a really beautiful vision. And I think B was also very, very inspired by this, because you really have to dream big, and you really have to be interconnected with other communities around the world. But I wonder, do you think that, I also wanted to ask you this, B, so let's say we really truly stick to that vision, because Auroville is currently serving as the first international access point. Do you think that, let's say at a point, if there are access points, a couple in Europe, a couple in South America, do you think that Aurovillians would feel okay with other users like coming to Auroville, which is one of the access points, and just seamlessly interacting on the platform? Or do you think that it's smarter to have access points around the world that are standalone, that are not necessarily that doesn't necessarily allow for seamless user migration, but just more like, okay, you have these access points, you need to sign up again when you go to another access point. So I just wonder how that would work, because I've been really giving this a lot of thought. So,
well, I would go for the seamless.
Okay.
The seamless is always because you see, if people are somehow caught up in the Auroville vision,
yeah,
they will not exclude these people. You
yes,
see, everybody. I mean, because many people don't even know about Auroville, but if they have the Auroville consciousness, which we talk about, many people have that and never heard of Auroville. So,
yes,
because Auroville is about something that is natural and true. So everybody basically should have this some sort of inner being that connects, some sort
yeah,
of psychic being, whatever you want to say, some sort of interior connection.
yes,
So why create more obstacles for anybody? We make
yeah.
it as easy as possible. So I'm certainly, and I think technologically the seamless thing can work.
Oh, it's very doable.
And there are other examples like Sergio Lube's Living Directory. It's worldwide.
Yeah.
It's worldwide, and people can seamlessly from anywhere in the world get the profile of the person, get their passions, connect with them.
Yeah.
That thing's existed for 30 years. So
Yeah.
these things are there, and this Aura platform should take its place among these things.
I'm on the same. Yeah. So Julian, go ahead.
Because Barbara Marx Hubbard was doing the internet before the internet, and Sergio Lube was doing Facebook before Facebook. It's not that these things are new.
Yeah.
It's just it's a strange confluence that makes one thing right timing. I think we have with the Global Eco Village Network, Jen, an audience, because you had asked whether AVI might be a collaborator in this. Yeah. And certainly they should be introduced to this, and at the next gathering, depending on how all this travel thing goes. But maybe there could be a nice presentation online to have a Zoom with AVI. But I think Jen is an obvious vehicle, and Marty, and you've had Dan Greenberg involved very heavily with them, and so that might be an interesting place to talk about the seamlessness. I know in the co-op movement that if you were a member of a co-op, you could go to another co-op and show your membership card and get the same discount. Yeah. So there are things to do that would be seamless, and then also the things that you have to do because there are pirates and scoundrels and people who game the system. Yeah. And it happens unfortunately all the time. Especially there are false flags and strange people on the internet, so you have to protect against that with security.
Yes, I mean, I agree. I think also in terms of the collaboration, potential collaboration with AVI, I'm really hoping that in the next AVI meeting, I or B or I could just present about the Aura platform, because I really do believe that there's a lot of potential for this to go global. And if Auroville does really serve as a first successful case story, even more reason and incentive for other communities to be inspired by it, by to incorporate technological solution into their like community life, but not in a way that AI is taking over the world and we're not, but not in that way. Technology is just a tool like anything. If you use it consciously, it could really improve our quality of life. And that's how I've come to see it. So I hope that we can do that with AVI. That'd be really great. Because America...
I just want to explain, because I served as president of Auroville International and then on the International Advisory Council. I went through a kind of long cycle and am now focused on our work here in America at Madagiri, which is 50 acres, 100 miles north of New York City. And it's a beautiful place, and we created this eco building that we're calling Auroville House.
Oh, wow, nice.
And I'm still serving on the Auroville International USA board, but I don't have a position with Auroville International. And Mary Alexander, our treasurer, has been our main liaison recently, and also Brian Walton. So I've cycled off the AVI board, but of course still have a lot of people who I love and respect who are involved with it.
Yes. So I'm sure like when the time comes, I think, like you said, you talked about how serendipitously people are always all somehow related, right? So that I'm sure this will happen also with AVI without even any effort. I believe that convergence will come about in a natural way. I wanted to ask Julian like a very interesting question. So within like the internal team, we've been having discussions regarding how to introduce this platform in terms of, okay, so the question that we've been getting from the developers and also the UX UI designers is, okay, who's the target audience for this app, right? And I think a lot of us agree that it is for the community. It's a community-based app focused on newcomers or Aurovilians, long-term volunteers, and people also who might not necessarily have a certain status or a formal status in Auroville, but that have been a part of the community for a long time. So I just wanted to ask you, what do you think, because there's this debate going on right now in the team, okay, do you make it that anyone can sign up, right? Or do you target it a bit, right? Just the same debate as for UBI. Do you give really unconditional UBI, or do you like target UBI and then start from these small pilots and then build on top of that? So I really wanted to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Bob Swan was asking a similar question when people were asking about establishing land trusts. Can anybody join? Well, what if they want to spray Roundup in their garden?
Yeah.
Wait a second. We agree that land trusts are great, but the use of pesticides that could have consequences are not. So there's we have the Auroville Charter, and in working out the invitation to join the land trust, there was like a a charter or principles that you subscribe to. And I think this is we've tried to make a universal declaration of human rights. That's kind of the macro. So I would say, what's the micro version of that for people who would want to join, because you're doing it based on certain principles, and you want people of goodwill to come to Auroville. And, we have people who started off with goodwill and then end up being very cranky. So, this is human nature. But I think if we're serious about any project, we have to maximize its success and be protective of it. And there are standards to join the ashram and Auroville, and I think there should be standards to participate. And that if people sign on, then it's like Auroville is a concept that the whole planet needs.
Yes.
But it's based on human unity. And if you are working against human unity, then
it's not for you.
Better luck next lifetime.
I agree. You know what was like an interesting point that came up in our team meeting yesterday is so the FSM network, the Korean version of the Aura, they made it an open door policy in the sense that anyone could like download the app and have access to it. And you would think that's the best way to go, right? Like that's the whole principle on which UBI, Universal Basic Income, is built on. But unfortunately, what we saw was this tendency that people took a lot from the platform, all these free goods that were being put up to encourage people to join the platform without actually offering in return. So again, getting back to this whole analogy of peer-to-peer system that we have in torrenting, it didn't work. I mean, the whole torrenting wouldn't work if people didn't also upload and download at the same time, right? So I think that's why we are having this conversation as a team right now. Okay, of course, nobody's going to argue that we want to have an open door policy, hopefully one day. But my personal view is that we need to go step by step. It's just we need to create a good foundational nucleus before expanding further. So that's my personal opinion. Yeah. How about you, B? Do you have any comments that you'd like to share on this?
No, I think what both of you said is absolutely right, because you just can't throw the door open because, as you said, as Julian said, the pirates are there, and unfortunate. Yeah. But I think it doesn't mean then we're elitist or exclusive or anything like that, which some people are saying.
Yeah.
That's to take it to the other extreme. We're just doing what we have to do. You have to do this. You can't let the baby run down the street, and get run over.
Yes, good analogy.
So we take care of the baby. We take care of the baby. We take care of the baby.
Exactly. We have to guard the baby. We have to guard the baby.
And when the baby gets big, the baby will be very strong.
I agree. I want to just conclude our fruitful conversation today by asking one question. So my mother is a great mother because she gives me so much guidance. It's I see that when I was growing up in the community. So keep in mind my mom is from Korea, so she's definitely a bit more. She gives a lot more guidance than let's say a mom from the Western Hemisphere. Anyway, so when I was growing up, I would think to myself, oh my God, my friends have so much freedom. They can come home whenever they want. They can move out at the age of 14 and live in a treehouse. No, not with my mom. So she gave a lot of guidance, right? But now that in retrospect, I realize how much I've grown through her guidance, because it's easy to be a parent who says, oh, go off, do whatever you want. But she gave me a lot of good advice and guidance. And also similarly for this project, she asked me this question. So she said, Dambi, when you're working on something this aspirational and this idealistic, you need to ask yourself first and foremost before any action, what type of world do you want to create? What type of a world do you want to be a part of? Because if you don't, without that vision, you have no direction. You don't have that northern light to see where north is, right? So I want to ask that question to both of you, because before you effectuate any change, you have to really envision the type of world that you want to live in. So how about you start off, Julian?
I have to ask B to start off.
Okay, start at B.
That's easy because we've been given so much guidance, about Auroville. And so for me, we have the charter, we have the dream, and we have to be a true Aurovillian. It's all spelled out there. Of course, it's spelled out in general terms, but to me, it's so clear. The mother said to live in Auroville, you have to be a willing servitor of the divine consciousness. Okay, what's that mean? I have to respond to the highest light that I can reach, and that's the guiding. That's the Northern Star or the guiding light. And they gave us the sunlit path. Mother and Sri Aurobindo gave us a sunlit path where we believe that the divine grace is actually tweaking every little move you think you're making. Yeah. And we think we're doing, but we're actually channels. And just to go with that channel flow, align with the divine. It's just a matter of, inner work.
Yes.
And then it becomes spontaneous. So it's a very for me. I'm so happy that I had the Auroville experience to nurture me in all this, and to let that grow, and let that grow, and let that happen, and it. That's a great thing about getting older, Danby. I can tell you, the older you get, the more you see how it was all arranged so nicely for your great benefit. And the guiding light is always there.
I agree. That's I think one of the things that I'm most grateful to Auroville for. Just having that. I mean, I don't want to put anyone down, but I see even in my own generation, if you grow up in a very urban culture, in an urban context, you don't necessarily get taught that you need to have a certain guiding light. Your guiding light becomes getting the right job, climbing up the social ladder. And for me, because I grew up in Auroville, whether I was consciously aware of this or not, but growing up at that kind of context, I think I was naturally more primed to want a life where I could contribute to the community. Because isn't that the highest form of life, to really contribute to the world that you're part of, and like with your own capacity and with your own talent? So I'm really grateful for that. So Julian, are you ready to share your views?
Yeah, I knew B would give a better answer, and I had to let my puppy out. She's very enthusiastic and saw someone she loved, and I knew she wouldn't keep quiet inside. So I live in Woodstock, so we're still back in this peace, love, and music thing of the '60s, and I'm so grateful to have those ideals that extend to the political and social justice. And Sri Aurobindo was a revolutionary, and Mother was a painter. These are not people isolated from art and politics, but they saw the highest thing was this self-knowledge, and that's what we call the psychic, this soul spark has to lead. And the more that we can do to nurture and be in touch with that, and understand that it is a bit chaotic. It's not an organized religion. We're not selling soap. It's such a relief that we're not selling soap. And hopefully, if we're open and paying attention, the people who are called will help us take the next step, and we ourselves will have the trust that that's the truest truth, that there is that guidance that will come at the right time.
I agree. Thank you, both. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, B, for this wonderful conversation. I think I honestly enjoy Aura Talks, not for just my further learning, but I always feel like there is a reaffirmation of my own values, and I get re-inspired each time I have conversations with you and with new people about why I'm doing this. And thank you for that. I really appreciated this conversation so much.
Well, I appreciate your enthusiasm, and also what you do you inspire me. I mean, I know there's hope for the world now. I know there's hope for the world.
Thank you, B. You inspire me constantly. Thank you so much, Julian, for being here. And please stay tuned for the upcoming episode on Aura Talks. And if you ever have any questions about the Aura platform, or you just want to check in to better live vicariously through us, then reach out to us anytime.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danby.
Thank you guys so much. And we always just conclude each episode by saying ciao for now. So we'll say ciao for now in 3, 2, 1. Ciao for now. Ciao for now. Aura, the value we create together.